So that's going to be very different than almost every other staff position. He or she will have much more free time. And so some of the nurses have helped with anywhere where it's needed, game times, cooking, or they've taken the time to rest and have make camp kind of a getaway for them too. Critical times for the nurses are typically the early mornings when they're making sure the kids have the meds that they have to take in the mornings and evenings. Those are two big times where designated medications are taken. Uh, then they're got to be available for any emergency that comes up. So especially during game times and night games are times where little types of injuries, scraped knees and twisted ankles and that type of thing can happen. They obviously are going to be on call at night if a kid wakes up with bad stomach or pains or whatever. They need to be available for that. The nurse for the youngest camp, the elementary, can oftentimes be the surrogate mother, offering comfort to kids that might be a bit homesick and encouragement and that type of thing for them. Oftentimes those kids will come in complaining of some ailment, but really they just need a loving mom touch, and the nurse can provide that for them. So part of the check-in is not only at the registration table. Once they've gone through all the forms they do at the registration table, they will then take their medical release form and check in with the nurse. Every student checks in with the nurse because we need to have all that information available for anything that might happen during the week. And it's also our authorization to treat the child if anything happens. And so they will check in with the nurse. They'll register any medications that they may have with them and need to take. But after they've done with the nurse and that form is completed, she will release them then to meet with their counselor, where they can then go to their tents and get things set up and ready for the week of camp.
It is bruises and scrapes, a fall from a tree, an abrasion. You'll have an abrasion. You'll have a possibly a knocked out tooth. You know, things happen. Um, um, Dislocated finger. You
Yeah.
know, you try to catch a ball, but you jam your finger instead. There's camp is about emergency medicine. You stabilize and you um, take them in for professional services.
So obviously, it's going to be critical that she assesses every injury. We want to always err on the side of caution and safety. So if it's a little bit more serious, she's going to be assessing whether it would be wise to take them into the emergency room for any extra care. For anything more serious, there is an insurance incident report form that has to be filled out. So he or she would be filling that out. You're obviously going to be in good communication with your director and making any decisions on is this something we should inform the parents of? Every scraped knee or twisted ankle, you don't need to let the parents know. But if there's something a little more serious, you might want to let the parents know about it, even if it's not big enough to go to the emergency room. Obviously, anything that we're taking the child in to be evaluated, urgent care, emergency room, we would let the parents know about that. And of course, the director would be involved in making those calls or in informing them. But the nurse is going to be critical in making those decisions on what needs more care than what should be provided right at camp. Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, that's probably more common than discipline. We very rarely have had to send a kid home for disciplinary issues, but it has happened. We want to protect the rest of the camp. But the other main reason would be injury or sickness. And so obviously the nurse is going to be key in helping make this decision. But if a child gets sick, most likely he probably doesn't want to, or she doesn't want to stay at camp. When you're not feeling well, you prefer to be home usually. But even if they want to stay, we can't take the chance of infecting the whole rest of the camp with sickness. So if the nurse says, hey, this person is sick and contagious and they just need to be home and under, bed rest and this type of thing, you call the parents, you make that decision together with the parents and do that. Obviously, if there was a bad injury, they may end up going home, although we did have times where people went to the emergency room, got stitched up, and said, "Nope, I'm back at camp." So, again, those are each situation is fluid. It just depends upon the health of the kid, the health of the camp, and the parents and the nurse together making a good decision. So actually, the director, the nurse really needs to familiarize themselves with the nurse's station and what we have available there. We do have a quick emergency shelf that is designated with the most likely needs of this type of emergency. It has a tourniquet, an AED, and a choking device on it, so that those would most be the likely type of immediate emergencies that need to be taken care of right away. And so they need to be familiar with that. So while some staff is staying with the student, the nurse or a counselor or somebody can be designated to run grab the needed item and bring it to the point of the situation so that it can be administered, preferably by the nurse. The director, again, should be familiar with it. But mostly we want the nurses handling these situations. And so be familiar with that shelf so and you can get there quickly and quickly respond in the case of that type of emergency. Again, when we have to go to the urgent care emergency room, obviously we would be calling parents, having them meeting us so they are well informed of what's happening. Camp does have insurance, but oftentimes families might want to use their own insurance, so that, those things need to be taken care of as well. But the immediate goal is the safety of the camper and getting them taken care of.
So during the week of camp, the safety of the students is the number one priority. This is why we keep a nurse on staff and we keep a fully stocked nurse's station and a shelf that has equipment that you wouldn't normally see in a home, like a tourniquet or an AED, and we make sure staff are trained on these. Included with the shelf is a list of emergency numbers like poison control in the local hospital. That's going to be right next to the phone and also in the nurse's station. And of course, 911 is your first call. And we've also included emergency medical training videos after this. And even if you're familiar with that information, I would urge you, the nurse and the director, to go through that information because the safety of the students falls on your shoulders.